Training Academy for today's episode of From the Command Post. My name is Raphael Gibson, and I am the Battalion Chief of Training. So today we're here to talk about the tornado event that took place in our county on June 5th, and we have Battalion Chief Mann and Captain Machala. We were supposed to have Captain Crofter, some other folks, but as you guys are aware, we had that fire in 34's area, so we're a little discombobulated. So without further ado, we'll get started. So, Chief Mann, you're here because you were the incident commander that day.
Right.
You were working Battalion 3. So just go through the day with us. When did you guys realize that the tornado had come through the county? How did you communicate with your folks? So just kind of go through the day for us.
Right. So, the day was just a normal day. Hot and humid, chance of some storms in the evening. So, evening time, I'm at Station 33 doing rounds, and I start hearing some background noise about, 14's on a wreck. I'm not, typically paying much attention to what's going on in Poolesville, but something is catching my ear, and I'm hearing something about debris fields and unable to get to the scene. I believe they were up off of White's Ferry Road, and they were asking for units to come in from the 28 side. And then I hear the captain there talking about a funnel cloud coming from west to east heading towards Gaithersburg. I'm like, well, that's unusual. So I left 33. I'm heading back to 32, talking with the doc, making sure that we're all aware that this is going on. He had already engaged and brought units back to their station. In the meantime, 14 and 31 are running this crash in the middle of this tornado. They've got a car with trees on it and injuries. So they're mitigating that and trying to keep themselves safe as well. About the time I pulled up on the ramp of Station 32, they dispatched the TRT event with a tree on a house with a report of multiple people trapped. So started going there, was about a mile or so out, and Chief Hine, Chief 703 Bravo, gets on the radio and talks about the debris on 355. P&E is completely blocked off. He had no access to get to it from that route and make sure that all the units, because that would have typically been H's route of travel, is to come in 355 to P&E. They can't make it, so we all come in the backside of it, arrive on the scene. Eight gets there a little bit ahead and talks about a possibly two-story home, completely leveled, and wires down on the Bravo side.
Okay, so before we get too far ahead, you guys have the audio and a couple of pictures of the incident. We can play that.
Yeah, what appears to be a two-story house, large tree into it. Trying to make access to the occupants. The house is completely leveled at this time. So, right, all incoming units. Do not access the Bravo side. The Bravo side of the structure. Service lines, power lines are down.
708, walk over to my car. Pull up. 703 Montgomery units coming to Belleville. As reported, it's a one-story single-family dwelling, pretty near level. You have to make contact with any occupants. We're making one way to do that now. The Bravo side will be off limits. I will have stationary command post behind engine 708 on Tulip Drive. Our objectives at this point is to, without entering the structure or the collapse zone, to call out and try to make contact. Engine 708, when and if you make contact, let me know.
Yeah, maybe Battalion 7.
Okay, so you arrived on scene, right? This is obviously a non-SOP driven incident, right? So when we talk about the two major types of incident, whether it be a simple or complex or SOP or non-SOP driven, you gave your own scene report and you established objectives, which is awesome, right? Like that's what we want to hear. Talk to me about your thought process and how you come across these non-SOP driven incidents, and how do you, for the listener, go through that
Sure.
thought process?
So, we run that same house with smoke or fire showing. I might say some stuff, but those guys are already doing it. It's what we do. It's kind of the bread and butter. The issue I have with a call like this is are those guys going to treat that just like it's a house fire and, I've got people trapped, let's gain entry. What I want them to do, and you hear me say it on the radio, is like, let's slow this down a little bit. Let's try to make, contact with these folks, find out where they're at, if we can even make entry, if we can maybe just reach in and grab them and pull them out. Do we even have an urgency? Maybe the tree's down and they can't open their door, the event's over. We just got to get to a point where we can safely bring them out. Or are those folks really in trouble and we need to act a little bit with more urgency? The fact that this tree came down in the aftermath of a storm, or as part of a storm, gives me a lot of pause with environmental hazards. Do we have an active gas leak with these wires that are down? So I wanted to determine where these folks were, what sort of peril they might be in, so that we can decide how much risk we're gonna put out there. And I want to figure that out real fast, so that we're not just.
So what was your number one concern when you arrived on scene?
My number one concern was: is this still a dynamic event? Is the tree completely down? Is whatever's going to come down from the house completely down? Are all the wires that are going to come down, or are we still in a dynamic event that, as we're shifting some stuff to try to make entry, are we going to roll this tree off of something that it's holding, and then we're going to create more of a hazard or even injure ourselves?
What about the people? Obviously, that had to have been one of the first thoughts in your head as well.
Yeah, I want to establish quick contact with them. How many folks are there? Where are they? And what do they need to, are we able to help them self-extricate, or do we need to actually get into some potential TRT events here?
Yeah, and was there anybody outside, any additional information from a resident or anybody telling you how many people were inside?
There was folks outside, right? But
Yeah.
It's a neighborhood.
Right.
It's all the folks that would have come out after a tornado goes through your neighborhood, and so now you want to come out and see what's going on. So nobody with good information. Gaithersburg City Police was on the scene. I don't know if they were there ahead of us or about with us. They confirmed that they were there ahead of us, because I do remember the one officer telling me that he's made contact and that they believe there's 5 people in that house.
Okay, so you got on scene, you set your objectives, you gave, that was clearly communicated. What was the next step into your mind? At this point, obviously,
Right.
you're going to let the incident breathe a little bit, right? Give these guys a chance to do what they need to do. And then at that point, what are you doing in the car? What are you thinking?
So I'm not in the car. I grabbed my notepad and went around by way of the Delta side to the Charlie side, which is where 8 had assembled. And I'm trying to get an idea of, what are they doing? What are we going to do? And it's easier in this type of call, I think, to, at least in the initial stages of it, get out and walk around and put my eyes on it instead of trying to interpret what it is you're telling me. So I'm out there, I'm standing with 8 on the back porch. As I come out to go around there, Jimmy Henry, who was Safety 700, and I know he's a TRT officer, he's coming around, and I told him, listen, I need you to put on your TRT hat. You're the ISSO, but go back here with 8. I want you guys to develop some sort of a plan as to, if we're going to enter, how we can do it safely, or do we need to wait for.
Yeah, and that brings up a
Specialized.
point, right? Like, most of our safety officers have second and third disciplines,
Disciplines, yeah.
and that makes it super valuable for us as command officers on the scene to be able to rely on a guy like Jim.
Yep.
Switching to you, Maddie, as a company officer, you get there, you see this. What are you telling your folks? I know Captain Crofter was supposed to be here, but because of that fire, he's not here. So from your perspective, right, as a captain, you pull up, you got something like this. What are you thinking?
So, I've run a similar incident, not as a result of a tornado, but severe thunderstorm, go for a service call for wires or whatever we got dispatched for, a tree down or whatever, and get there, and there's, a tree on a house with pretty significant structural damage. I think the biggest thing is, like the chief already mentioned, is just really kind of making sure you go through, and again, like, it's not an IRP discussion, right, but like, you really do kind of use that acre mnemonic, right? It
absolutely.
really is about, hey, like, I need to take a step back here because it's not automatic. Like, it's not a, hey, I'm giving my size, I'm giving my sir. Where's the smoke? Where's the fire? Is there anybody trapped? That's just typically what our IRP is geared for. But using that, hey, I really need to take a step back, assess this. Like you said,
Slow things down,
really
right?
just slow things
Yeah.
down.
Yep.
Have people, we want to just go do things usually, right? Hey, there's, is there anybody in here? I'm just going to go in and figure it out. Let's stop a second. Like, can we secure the gas first? Let's take a look. Are there any power lines down?
Yep.
And on the one I ran, that's actually what we ended up doing. We kind of did an assessment. Nobody could tell us if anybody was home or anything like that. Wasn't as large of a tree, but pretty significant structural damage to mainly one bedroom. So basically, we did a quick assessment on the outside, secured the gas at the meter on the outside, made sure there was no power lines down or anything, and made a quick search of it away from the affected area. So basically, I think just slowing everybody down is the main thing.
Yeah, so something that comes to me immediately as a tactic, right? We talk about this in our Mayday policy, that like look, listen, light kind of thing, right? You stick some lights on windows, right? Hey, is anybody in here, without actually engaging the structure before we confirm, gas, electric, and secondary collapse issues or something like that. Okay, you want to keep playing the video so we can move on down the line, or do you have something else?
Well, no, the next part is, right about the same time, I'm getting Jimmy Henry spun up with Company 8. ECC's calling me and telling me about, which actually giving them good props on this call. They were really forthcoming with the information. As best as they had it, they were feeding it to me. Here's an example of where that whole neighborhood had several other events going on at the same time, and he was making me aware of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something so obviously it's not company officer related, which is kind of why I was here, to kind of bounce some company officer or chief officer to company officer interface stuff around. But I was going to ask that because I was working, because it was a C shift. Obviously, it was out of our realm. It was down in Gaithersburg, so I was pretty.
Where were you working?
Company 9.
Okay.
Company 9. Yeah, it didn't come through Hyattstown. Weird. So I'm listening to it, like I listen to most things in the county, and we see the board, right? All these incidents are popping up, all in the same box area, right? Again, I don't know that area super well, but so that was something I was going to ask, and I guess I could just ask it now because you brought that up. Was there ever a thought, like in your mind, like, hey, this is now bigger than, like, we got dispatched this one incident, and obviously there's life safety hazard here, like this is a priority incident, but did it was there any point where you're like, this is bigger than this, whether it was when the doc came or whenever, where you're like, man, maybe this has to be like an area command kind of event, or like I'm actually have a division now and part of a bigger incident was, I don't know if that's a conversation for later or now, but.
Yeah, we can have it now real quick. I'll tell you no from my perspective, because you'll hear the audio. They're going to tell me that they're running 2 other TRT events, like within blocks of where I'm at. Okay. I don't know what's going on over there. I know pretty reasonably certain, with some certainty, that I'm in an event that has people trapped, and I have to be locally
Engaged
focused.
there, yeah.
I threw Chief Hine was still trying to make his way to this scene, and I threw him the option of, like, it was more of, I don't think I had to say it to him. I'm sure he was already engaging, but we got to clean this up. Like, hey, you're not on my run anymore. If you're in a position to go to one
Manage
of those.
that event, yeah.
So he went to those. I want to say, without putting words in his mouth, that they were both pretty well relatively non-events, the specific addresses that they gave. And then when he was done with that, he positioned himself, I think, at Walnut Hill Shopping Center, which was just south of this event, and did just that. He made like an area command, and they started doing some window surveys. Peripherally from where we were.
Yeah, because I know they ended up being a bunch of service calls too, like just for wires, along with the reports of possibly people trapped from trees on houses and stuff.
But me trying to manage all of that from here and would have taken away from what this could have potentially built out. I mean, this was didn't really turn out to be a big TRT event, but we don't know that at this point.
Right.
So
Okay, so can we continue playing on, please?
Command to Montgomery, go ahead.
For your information, also running number 3 Holly Drive and 201 Rolling Road. Both also for trees on houses with people trapped. Both have resources going at this time.
Okay. The 3 Bravo, if you can break free, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm going to command post. Just let me know what you're going to do. Yeah, I'm pulling up the rolling road now. Okay. And Commander Montgomery, the reports of people trapped, where did they come from? Are we on the phone with them? Were we at some point on the phone with them?
To Battalion 703, call taker's landline with the patient. 6 occupants total, 1 patient going in and out of consciousness.
So, I asked him the question, like, where is this information coming from? Because we've all run trees on houses. I want to know, is the information firsthand, or did a neighbor come down the street, see a car in a driveway and a tree on a house? Because this goes back to, I'm still trying to figure out how much risk I'm willing to put out there for an erroneous,
Yes.
potential erroneous information. And they came back with, again, good information. I'm on the phone with them. There's 6 people in there is what they're telling me. It ended up being 5, and that's a whole nother issue we'll talk about later on how I dealt with that. Those folks are getting the information from guys in the house. They're relaying it to me. It comes, they're telling them 6 people, so we're looking for 6 people. And I know that they're trapped because they're telling me, and not only that, but there's one that's probably critically injured because she's going in and out of consciousness, right? So that now will speak to why we engaged prior to TRT arriving.
Right, so you received that message in your mind, you've confirmed, right?
Yep.
More than once now that there are 6 people in there, I'm on the phone with them. Our risk tolerance changes, right? We talk about risk a lot to save a lot and all of those things, right? And this is why it's important, specifically talking to company officers, when we ask you guys information, when we're pushing or we're pulling for information, that we give good reports, right? Because at that point, sitting in that car, we're able to raise that risk level, or that accepting more risk, I should say, right? To be able to send people into a place where we could potentially get hurt. So that's a great point. Okay, so moving on, you received that information. What was your next action?
So now I'm in the backyard. I got Squad 3's crew comes up to me. So I tasked them with getting with 8 and safety, figure out what their plan is, and let's start bringing and staging tools to the back, because everything was going to be focused from the back of the house because of the tree down and all the other debris. There was no Bravo or Alpha access. So start staging tools back here, and then when TRT arrives, we've got a cache of stuff that we can start with. About that same time, or before they really started to engage, as they're talking with Tommy Henry, Squad 29 shows up, Captain Crawford, and now I'm like, well, this is even better. I got the TRT folks here. They can manage that. I know there's a bunch going on, and somewhere in the audio, I make the announcement that I'm going to put Squad 3 in service. I know they're tasked for stuff, and I don't need 2 squads on this run. So
even in the middle of all this, you're trying to think of that bigger picture, right? County.
Well, I know there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I could hear it as I'm coming up the way. I'm listening to the police. They're talking about. I listened to the one officer talk about watch the tornado go across 270 right at 370. So I know there's potentially a lot going on, and I don't want resources sitting around doing nothing on this event. So I've got a squad. I've got TRT folks coming. They can be utilized somewhere else. Before I got to putting them in service, once I got my plan developed, they pretty quickly brought 1 or 2 of the victims out. They weren't seriously injured. They come out, they were bloodied up a little bit, and I think what they did is they determined they could get in through the kitchen and then breach a wall. They were on that it's a very small house, so it was just on the other side of that wall. They breached that wall and were able to bring 1 or 2 of them out. Now I got 2 folks that need medical attention and nobody to treat them. So I gave that task to Squad 3.
Okay.
To start triaging and treating these folks, and we'll get them some transport units when we can.
Okay. What else? What do you got?
I guess when it comes to making that assessment, right, so if you're a chief officer coming down the road, obviously you were there very quick compared to 8's arrival just based on proximity and stuff like that, but say if you were working, if it was in 14's area, right, and you're working, Battalion 3, and, Battalion, whoever's going to be first due there is probably Battalion 3, depending on the part of 14's area,
I would
right?
bet so, but go ahead.
Yeah. So you're coming up there. It's still going to take you a minute to get up there. So you're hearing some of these, right? At what point are you going to interject and expect or I guess assume that the officer, whoever that is making a good risk assessment, or you run the same incident, and they're
Right.
talking about giving the same supplements, and hey, we're gonna engage to get these people out. At what
Mm-hmm.
point, what's going through your head if an officer is making that decision? You're hearing this on the radio. Like, at what point are you gonna interject or maybe try to throttle
that's a
that
good-
back or let them
That's
go?
that's
Like,
a great question
yeah.
because we don't do that very much here.
It is a really
right?
good question.
It
I
is.
catch myself grabbing for the mic a lot, like on regular calls,
Yeah.
regular house fires that I'm coming from a distance. And I very intentionally put it back down and try not to engage, okay? Unless I hear something
Egregious. Yeah.
either egregious or something that just sounds so off that I want more information on it. And I've done it very few times, and sometimes it's a struggle. And there's two parts to that. One, I need to know and accept that the captains and lieutenants that are riding the front seats of these apparatus are making competent decisions, and that they know that we believe in them.
Right.
And I think if we question them on every single time they say something like that, it
It
erodes
erodes.
that.
Yeah,
Erodes that
definitely.
relationship.
Definitely.
So if it was this call here and they were talking about going in, I would like to think that I would have engaged a little bit coming from a distance and asked some pretty pointed questions as to what have you done to determine that this is a safe action,
Right.
and that you're going to be able to be effective. I mean, I don't care that you can get into the house that's possibly still shifting. I care that you're going to get in, do something that matters, and be able to get out before that happens.
Right.
And I think the questions start arising when the risk level doesn't match the information being given.
Sure.
Right? So if they're talking about going into any structure, no matter what's going on, and we haven't heard information, right? We haven't heard that pull or that push, I should say. It's on us, right? Because at the end of the day, we're responsible.
Right. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
and-
on us as company officers too, and I
Right.
know a lot of it has to do with the relationship you have with whoever the officer is and what you're. But I mean, if we're not pushing the correct information, and saying, I might be thinking through this, like my thought process might be correct, right?
Yeah.
I've done X, Y, and Z, but if you don't get
just
that
need you
push,
to articulate that.
exactly. So that's where that back.
And you talked about trust a little bit, and I want to hit on that because sometimes when we're asking these questions, it may not be like, well, Maddie and I have worked together a long time, and so have we. If I'm asking you that question, it just may be that I need to understand and be okay with that decision, right? It's not that I don't trust you because I know you
Right.
do a good job, right? It's just that at the end of the day, I'm responsible, and I say that when I ran that townhouse fire in 15's area, Featherwood, it was one of the first episodes we did, right? We were trying to go vent enter search. Josh Hart and those guys were trying to vent enter search, and Davis was like, whoa, I know you guys are aggressive. I know you guys are competent. I know you guys are doing good work. I'm just not comfortable with that based on what I'm seeing, right? And once he explained that, nobody on that fire ground was like, oh, he doesn't trust us, right? So, but that was a great question, great discussion, because we don't do that here, right? Like other departments, you hear some people, like DC specifically, and even Prince George's sometime, you hear the battalion chief keying up and asking questions before they're on scene, and we're pretty good about letting the incident breathe before we start interjecting our thoughts.
And I'm not suggesting it's right or wrong.
Right.
Either way, this
Yeah.
is what seems to work well for me.
Sure.
If I'm getting good information and it sounds like whatever they're doing is pretty consistent with the way we should be operating, I'm not asking. I don't need to ask the question.
Yeah. Okay, so the two patients are out, right? You're still,
Yeah,
so you
brought-
decided to not take stationary command post.
Well, I did. I just walked to the backyard.
It was just in the backyard. So,
I needed to be proximal from there. Otherwise, I might as well sat in my office.
Right.
So when I run house fires, with a lot going on, all the noise, I stay in the car because I can't hear and
Yeah.
do what I need to do. When I run people trapped or collisions or things like that, I almost always get out of the car,
Same.
take my notepad,
Yep.
and I go and do.
Yep.
Because it's, I hear it all the time. Oh, engine so-and-so, I got one trapped in the car, switch us over. What do you need another talk? I don't need to talk to you on the radio. You're right here. And I think we can have better communication that way. And this event, I thought, would be the same way.
So you felt like you being on side Charlie, being able to see what's going on, right? It could have been a high-risk incident. It's a non-SOP driven, so for you to be comfortable in the decisions, you wanted to be on that part of it.
Yeah, well, so I'm running this as if it is a high-risk event until we rule everything else out that it's not. And I was really fortunate in the fact that I've got D'Amico and Buckley at 8, and they're both really competent, and they're pretty good about they engage, but they're really good about not just blindly engaging. Like they're
Sure.
good about gathering information and thinking through processes. And on top of that, I got Jimmy Henry there, who can really help decide whether or not this is a dynamic
Go or no go,
Yeah,
right?
exactly
Yep.
right.
Yep.
And if these guys are saying competent things to me that match up with what I'm seeing, it takes my pause away. I'm really interested in making access and getting these folks out. If we have to go down the route of shoring and doing whatever, I'm okay with that too. But I want to get them out before we get to that point, you know.
Okay.
And we talk about the RP. It doesn't specifically speak to it necessarily, but there is a structural collapse appendix.
Yep.
And fortunately, I think, you know, we were able to mitigate this without having to get to that part of it, so.
Yeah, and for me, from a company officer perspective, like I'm not a TRT officer, right? Like I have, you know, some
Sense.
you know, yeah, right. I would like to think, right? But it's like, at what point am I qualified to make that decision, right? Obviously, like you said, a lot of things play into it. It's high risk. I know I have confirmed people trapped. Like, look, if I have confirmed people trapped in a well-involved structure, what's to say that that place is structurally sound, right? But I
Right.
get to make that determination as a captain, right? Having
Yep.
you know, that whatever level of experience and training I have. So to me, yeah, this is a different cause, but at the end of the day, we're still dealing with people that are in a dangerous situation, right? Potentially a dynamic,
Yeah,
you know,
rapidly deteriorating
right.
structure.
And
Yeah.
so, you know, I think maybe everybody isn't the most, like, none of us are structural engineers, right? Even like TRTO, they have way more training in shoring and
Right.
and structural stability and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, like, we're going to have to make a decision sometimes that's just in the best interest of the citizens, the best of our ability. I mean,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's continue down the incident road. You got 2 people out at this point,
Right.
right?
So I assigned the rescue squad from 3 to triage and start treating them. I still don't know at this point. I mean, I watched them come out. I think only one had to be assisted out physically. Like we had to physically carry her out. She was an elderly lady. She was the one I assume they were talking about was in and out of consciousness. She did go to a trauma center. The rest of the folks, once we freed them, they were able to get out.
So the
walk out.
company's entered the structure at this point, or will we still at that threshold?
We had entered through the kitchen
Yep.
to the back wall of that room that they were in. So part of when they got on the porch, they were yelling out. They were able to determine that these folks were in fact. So I got information from ECC, and I don't know if we've gotten to that part on the audio yet, but they were in essentially the alpha quadrant, you know, the front left bedroom.
Okay.
So we had that narrowed down, and then when they called out, when they were able to determine that that is in fact where they're at, and it's right there. So they decided, and if you look at one of the photos here, the house was not completely leveled. It didn't go through even the center of it, which is what we all kind of thought. It went through really just the front half of the house.
That's a good picture.
So.
So I guess it's more like the
so
delta
this is
delta
the front.
quadrant.
So they're over
Okay.
here, and they were able to be pretty confident that they can. The house was structurally sound enough to go into the kitchen, breach that wall, and so you can see there's much more house. So they're back in here. And
Okay.
They operated over here, and they were able to breach a wall that was on this side of the ridge, and be able to bring them through.
Awesome. Okay, we want to continue to play the audio, please?
So, sure.
Door. We have 1 occupant from the house outside, confirming there are 4 remaining inside of a quadrant.
Yes, 7 We've made partial access to the house. We do have contact with what they're saying is 4 people. They are trapped in the room. We are going to attempt to make access.
The attempt to make access, right? 'Cause attempting to make access tells me you're going to do something scary. Let's get an idea of nature of injuries, so we can decide the urgency here, right? I've got Safety 700 here. He's going to be ISSO. He's also a TRTO. He's making his way to you right now. So get with him and develop a plan.
Okay. Be advised, we're
And I guess at that point, I hadn't, Jimmy hadn't been back there and gotten back to me with what the plan is and that it's in fact safe. So now I'm like, I get that you have that you hear them, you're there, but I don't know that we're ready to make entry yet. Let's figure out exactly where they're at and what sort of needs they have before we decide that we're going to forgo any of the TRT things and make this entry. So it goes back to what we just said. Jimmy gets back there, they decide where the tree is, what's structurally sound, what isn't, and we can make this pretty safe and get these folks out of there. So that's where we went with that.
Okay. Anything from a company officer
Yeah, I
perspective?
think we touched on all of it up until this point anyway.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to bring up before I tell them to continue?
Nope.
Okay. Go ahead.
east side, closest to the Bravo corner. The occupants are going to be located in the Alpha quadrant, front of the house, towards the Alpha Bravo corner.
Okay. Good. Hunter and SWAT 3's officer are going to come with you, assess and develop a plan, and we'll move forward from there. Command to any units coming. Just to be clear, you cannot access them beyond it. Come in Hutton and stage on Hutton about half a block away. Until I sign, you just start setting on the TRT access.
Chairman again, so nice. Man. We've made access. One occupant's on her way out. She is going to need EMS. I do have Safety 700 in here with us. We're just inside that window. He's currently assessing everything.
Okay. Once we get a plan in place, I'm probably going to release SWAT 3. I got SWAT 29 here. Tell me what EMS, I'm away from the unit right now. Give me a rundown of all the EMS units I have, transport units.
You have Medic 708, Medic 731.
Yeah, run 55 Summit, Hutton, Baldwin. And you can position your units all the way down. Any other unit coming to the scene that's not a CRT or a transport unit, just stage out on Hutton. And Commander Montgomery, replace Medic 731 on it as an additional transport unit. They're staffing for CRT requirements.
We're kind of caught up with the audio with where we've been. We got one victim out. Units are arriving on the scene. So I missed the end of that. So I asked them the transport units. They told me it was a medic unit from 8 and a medic unit from 31.
Yep.
Truck 31, or Lieutenant Pierce from 31 was on one of the TRT assets. He came up and said that the medic unit was not on the call. They were actually staffing the UTV or one of the box trucks, something. So then I had to get them replaced and give some direction as to where I need the folks to stage, because it's a tight neighborhood. I know there's already access issues due to the storm.
Yep.
So I had them all stage a half a block away, except for transport units and TRT units.
So 2 questions that come to mind a little later. Now, do we know how big this tornado was? I know there's a video of it. Did they ever I know
Biggest one of the day.
that's true.
It was big enough.
Right. I know that these guys have a video, so maybe they can play a video of the tornado going across town.
So I think this is actually out. Yeah, it does say so. Yeah, this is where it started out in Poolsville.
Yeah.
And it came through, lifted up, it came down in several different spots. It didn't leave a swath of destruction from
Right.
Poolsville or Dickerson or wherever the heck they were at, all the way through Gaithersburg and into Howard County. But I mean, it ended up doing some severe damage in Howard County as well.
Okay. So at this point, you have quite a few. You said 2 EMS units potentially, right? So, and a couple of the TRT units on top of some engine companies, some rescue squads, and some ladder companies, right? So how did you, as the command officer, keep track of all that, other than in your big head, right?
So when I come out of the car to do these things remotely, I always have the steno pad with me and a pencil. So I'm taking notes as we're doing things. When the TRT assets get there, I don't remember if it was I think it was Squad 29. They gave me one of their folks and said, "Here, he's going to scribe for you." I'm like,
Oh, that's awesome.
"Scribe for me? I don't get a scribe." So I had a guy actually document everything. He was documenting as units were going in. As I would turn to him and say, "Hey, note this, note that." All that stuff was documented on the steno pad. As far as units that were engaged in what could be the hot zone was really limited, and that was done deliberately. We're trying to affect something positive here, but limit our risk by having as few folks as I wanted everyone engaged that absolutely had to be engaged, and absolutely nobody else. I don't want anybody standing around in the area. If you're not touching something, get out of the way. And all that was documented.
Okay, awesome. Do we have any more video? No? Okay. Well, does anybody in the chat have any questions? And just for the folks in the chat, if you're a CCO, just put your name, just sign in with your ID. Because I just came back from that 34 house, I didn't get a chance to update the form. So if you could please just put your ID, if you haven't done so already, into the chat. I will get you guys when I get back to Station 32. All right, any questions from the chat as well?
So, while we're with that, we'll just sum up the event real quick, right? So they got the first 2 out pretty quickly. Somewhere in the audio, and we don't have to, keep going back and forth with the audio anymore. We're pretty much at the end of it. But I want to say it was Giza, EMS 703, comes up on the radio and says, "Hey, do you want a MAB?" Because we've got 5 or 6 victims, and we're still trying to reconcile that number. So I'm like, absolutely, bring the MAB. So MAB 720, whichever one was coming, 26, is coming. I got 2 transport units on the scene. They get to the 4th victim. They get, 2 or 3 of them out. He's telling me on the audio the 4th victim is pinned by his lower extremity. So I'm thinking, well, so much for being in and out of here really quick. So it apparently... it was just a matter of moving some debris that was on the floor. His legs were under the tree, but the tree wasn't physically pinning him any more than they moved a little bit of debris. He was able to slide right out. And funny enough, all these folks come out, they're, different degrees of bleeding and dried up blood. This guy comes out smoking a cigarette, drinking a beer, like, hey, he was completely unharmed, it seemed like,
Wow.
as opposed to any others. Once he got out, I guess the final occupant was able to climb up over and then come out pretty much on their own power as well. So now we've removed 5 folks from here, but I've got a report of 6. And 8 is telling me, hey, they said that's it, everybody's out. And I'm not arguing, but I'm like, listen, I'm
Questioning.
I'm questioning it because who is giving you that information? A dude that just sat in his living room and watched a ginormous tree come on his lap, right? So that guy's a little bit stunned and shook up. So I want to make sure that, who's this 6th person? Where did that come from? And they actually had a name. Like, well, so-and-so was supposed to be here. And within a few minutes, we found so-and-so out front. So,
great.
So, not only do I have the folks that were involved telling me there's only 5, we reconciled the 6th guy because he had, gone to the store and came back.
Yeah, and again, and it's not that you don't trust those guys. Obviously, Buckley and D'Amico and those guys are top-notch, right? But we got to trust but verify kind of.
Well, this wasn't a trust issue at all for me. With our folks, it was, we've got a discrepancy, and my only resource to clear this up is a stunned dude, a guy that just watched his largest investment in life get crushed.
Yeah, that's not specific to this incident either. We run into that a lot when in terms of accountability for number of patients, right?
Yep.
You run a wreck.
Yep.
And if the people start scattering around, if it's a church van or whatever, it's rolled over. Well, how many people were with you? Oh, how many patients we have? We have 8. Okay, well, so-and-so's with this ambulance, so-and-so's with that ambulance. Somebody ejected off in the woods, did the person who was just unconscious tell you that they're missing?
Right.
It's not just this incident. I think that's a really, even even people trapped in a fire, right? You listen to you know, thankfully not in this county. I mean, well, you can go back to Twin Brook Parkway. I'm thinking of Mayday audio, teaching safety and survival. Right? Listen to stuff. Hey, how many firefighters do you have missing? Right. Well, that's is it 2? Is it 3? Like that's
Right.
it's very it's across a bunch of different types.
It
of
happens
incidents,
often.
too, right?
It happens often.
So I don't just want the answer. I want to know that your process to develop that answer was valid.
Solid, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
So we got that all squared away, and you know, the incident is seemingly over, but I'm still at a point where I'm like, man, there's a lot of this house we haven't touched or been to. I've got TRT here, so I get with Captain Crawford, and this is kind of the big point where I wanted him to be here to speak to. What can we do to search the rest of this? Like, in my mind, I want to search every point of this house. I'm pretty confident we're not going to be able to do that safely today, right now. But what can we do, from a TRT perspective that's that matches our reasoning for risk, right? I think we have everyone out, so I'm not interested in exposing anybody into any more life safety issues to look for phantoms, but can we do something? And they had some plans, and I they used some cameras. I don't know exactly what else they did physically, but they were able to search the rest of that house and be very confident that
Without putting people in
without putting anybody in any undue risk at all.
That's awesome.
So now we're pretty much done with the rescues, treatment, transport of all these folks. Do a quick hot wash, and then I'm releasing units. But I at that point I kept Company 8 on the call to do. So there's a map here of the neighborhood. So I think at this point, somewhere along the event, Chief Hind come up to me on Alpha 4. He's operating on a different channel and tells me what he's doing. And I said, well, that's perfect because we're about to do the same thing here. But he's thinking more globally about, all of Gaithersburg, Rockville, whatever. And he's got resources for that. I'm looking locally at this neighborhood. So we were down here at Tulip and Dogwood. Operating here, so I gave 8 direction to pretty much do all of Tulip, Woodland, South Summit, and all the streets in between there. Do a windshield survey with the objectives of identifying any severely structural damaged homes, trying to account for the occupants, make sure we didn't have somebody in there that couldn't reach their cell phone and call for help. Document all those things and provide that information back to me. So they spent, I don't know, an hour, maybe a little bit more, doing that. Came back with several other houses that had trees on them. They were able to identify the occupants. We didn't have to engage at all either with injuries or utilities. And they provided me with that list, and I handed that off to
So
Code
when the incident was dispatched, you were the only BC attached to it?
Yes.
Okay, so you never had a second
I didn't have a second battalion chief.
until
So-
Chief Hind.
Well, Chief Hind added himself to the call, was in the area.
Yep.
And then diverted to the other events and then built out.
Yeah, so something that was very valuable to you, having him as the second CCO in
Well,
something
it
like
would've
this?
I don't know if it would have been a great help on this call because it didn't build out, right? If we had to actually go into TRT stuff, it might have been, to help with the bandwidth and such, to have a second officer. But I don't think just being by myself was a hindrance at all because I had, Jimmy Henry.
Sure, yep.
Mike Crawford, the folks from 8.
Yeah, I just say that because when I was very newly minted, I ran a pretty big, large piles of mulch that were on fire, and I was the only one, the only CCO there. I ended up having a volunteer chief show up, and then later, people were like, hey, why didn't you call for a safety officer or for a second chief? Like, nobody had any idea. We were running this event all night. I had every tanker in Montgomery County there with me, right? And it wasn't until super late, actually, Chief Goldstein ended up showing up, but it was a huge help, right? And just being able, stuff that they don't tell you that you don't know.
Right.
It's okay to pick up the mic and say, hey, I'm overwhelmed here, send me somebody else, right, to help out.
Even at 3 in the morning?
Even at 3 in the morning. Be ready. Be ready. Okay, it looks like there's no questions in the chat, unless you got any final words, Maddie?
No, I mean, I was going to just ask one kind of related to the same thing we were just talking about, and again, more of a chief officer level question than company officer, but as unit officers, we end up serving in these roles, right? Was there any I guess, obviously the span of control was relatively minimal in this incident because you only used a small amount of people, but did you give any thought to like, hey, if I need to, or like when do you typically break things out into either branches, groups, or divisions? Because I hear a lot of the time, we run these incidents, and as a unit officer, I might be a single unit resource, but I'm assigned a division, and again, obviously if it gets built out, that makes sense, but I feel like a lot of the time, and not that I want to say we overutilize it, 'cause it's good practice, right? And it helps with our span of control, but was there any thought given to that, and when do you typically start breaking stuff out, at what level?
So specific to this call, the thought that I had with that was if we're going, the units that I had operating physically were just Company 8 and the safety officer. So I didn't, I wasn't at all concerned with span of control.
Right.
I wasn't going to break that into any sort of groups or divisions. You mentioned branches. Branches is a whole nother level that we don't get into on our typical events, right? But on this event, if it was going to grow into a TRT true event, then I would have gotten with one of the TRT officers, whether it was going to be 31 or Mikey Crawford from 29, and develop that chain of command from them, because they use different language.
Right.
Their squads are not our squads, and they have their own safety. So I would have him build that out and then just point at him and tell him to do what he's already doing.
Right.
Let them manage that. As far as like everyday stuff, I don't know that we overutilize it. I try not to get into it a whole lot. We just had a fire the other day over in Twin Brook, and I never broke into groups and divisions because it's a small house. I had two companies working, and had everybody else tactically staging. It was a living room and some contents. And I think the rescue squad was searching. That was it. And everybody else just tactically staged. And there's no reason to break it down into groups and divisions.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like in my head of obviously if it was a larger structure, right, or you had like massive damage to an occupied school or something like that, right, where now you have multiple different disciplines operating. I mean, you almost need branches at that point, right, because you might have a technical rescue component, you may even have a suppression component, you have an EMS
and I think
component,
that's where we use groups.
Yeah,
right.
well,
I think groups is more fluid.
Well, it depends on
he's
how
talking
big
like
the
a giant
incident
thing.
is.
Yeah.
That's where we would get into,
Right.
And that wouldn't be me.
I mean, I've been on a fire before where there was an EMS branch because it ended up being more of a mass casualty / displacement
sure.
thing, and you're dealing with the groups and divisions, basically the suppression side of the incident, then you have an EMS side. So I guess because this was geographically so small and relatively, I mean, again, you're as a chief officer in this incident, you're managing essentially 4 people basically. It's the company officers and they're managing their people.
I'm not going above groups and divisions. When the doc arrives,
Yeah.
he may decide that that's the route we're going, okay, and that's great because that means he's going to assume the command. Probably, I don't mean it like that, but like he's probably going to, I mean, we're going to do this right.
Yeah.
He's going to assume the command. He's going to create, I don't know, maybe an operations division.
Yeah.
Or branch.
Yeah. And that happened with JD and I on that Georgia Avenue bomb call, right? It grew into something
much
so
larger.
much bigger. And
This
he assigned me.
evolved into that. If the whole
assignment-
neighborhood was leveled, I mean, it could have ended up that way.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. I don't see any questions. So that's it. Well, thank you guys for being here. Thanks for doing this. Our next episode is going to air on August 14th, and that's going to be the introduction of our new operations chief. So we're going to have Chief Cooper here with Chief Kerrigan and Chief Coletti, which is our operation leadership team. We're going to introduce them and dive into their priorities and goals. It's going to be really great opportunity to really figure out what the direction of the department. And the day after, we also have another episode scheduled to discuss the transformer fire where Chief Hudson and some others were in charge of. I think there were some volunteers from 3 that were there as well. So it's going to be a good 2-day special episodes to kind of kick off our end of summer. So without anything else, I don't think we have anything else. This concludes today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. And again, if you're a chief officer, make sure you have logged into a chat so I can catch you later. Thank you, guys.